Hello, and welcome to the Vintage Reel Service Guides. In this video, we'll take a quick look at servicing a Penn 720 spinning reel. This is not a full step-by-step tutorial, but it will show the major stages: disassembly, cleaning, lubrication, and reassembly. The detailed illustrated procedure lives on the Vintage Reel Service Guides site, which is linked in the description. As with any service procedure, it's a good idea to review the pages on the site that cover workspace setup, tools, safety, and pre-service inspection, and removing old line. We will assume you have reviewed these, or if you're more experienced, that you don't need to. If you'd like to follow a detailed step-by-step version of this service with photos and part notes, you'll find the full Penn 720 procedure on the Vintage Reel Service Guides site, along with guides for other mid-priced American-made reels from the same era. This reel has already been serviced, so the old line has been removed, the spool cleaned, and fresh line has been wound on. This small strip of painter's tape holds the line in place while we work. We'll start by disassembling the housing to expose the gears. First, the drag cap, spool, and handle come off. The drag cap just rotates counterclockwise, just spin it. And the spool pulls straight off. Now we can remove the handle. That rotates clockwise, opposite to the direction you would rotate it if you were retrieving line. And there's a small handle washer at the base. Make sure that you keep that in the tray, as it is a small part. Now we can remove the housing plate to expose the main gear and pinion. There's just one screw that holds the housing plate on, so we remove that. Then we use a plastic prying tool to pry off the housing plate, and we can finally get a look at the gears and see what kind of shape they're in. This reel's already been serviced, so the gears are clean, they've been lubricated, and they look good. Now we can remove the crosswind block and the spool shaft. So, with a pair of needle nose pliers, grasp the crosswind connector and just pull it straight out. Another small part. Make sure it stays in the tray. And now you can pull out the spool shaft. It just pulls straight out. And now you can just lift the crosswind connector off of the face of the main gear. Now, finally, we can remove the rotor cup. So, hold on to the rotor cup and grab a 3/8 inch socket wrench. There is just one nut that holds the rotor cup on. It may be on there fairly tight. And it's a small part, so keep track of it in your tray and just lift the rotor cup straight off. There's also a small washer in the rotor cup that needs to be kept track of, so put that back in the rotor cup and put the nut back in the rotor cup. So you've got all those parts together. Now we can disassemble the gears and clean and lubricate them. First thing is to remove the pinion gear. There's just one screw. Make sure that you use the right size screwdriver to prevent damaging the head of the screw. We just back this out. And it's a small part, so make sure that you keep it in a tray or some other small container. And now we can just push on the pinion gear assembly and slide it out the front of the housing. Note that the pinion is actually an assembly with three parts. There's a sleeve, a washer, and the gear itself. So this is the washer. We're sliding that off now. And there's the gear. So this is probably a good place to take a picture of the pinion gear assembly so you remember how to put it back together. the order of things is washer, then sleeve. So if you take a close look at the sleeve, you can see there's a groove in the middle, and there's also a small hole in the middle of that groove. That lines up with the hole in the housing. So that holds the sleeve and the pinion gear in place when you put the reel back together. Notice that there's a narrow side that goes towards the back of the housing when you reassemble, just like that. So wide side goes towards the front of the housing. Now we can take out the main gear and the thrust washer. There's a little nib on the front of the main gear. You can just grab that and pull the gear straight out. And the thrust washer in this case is stuck to the back of the gear. So we just pull that off. This is a white nylon washer. In some cases, especially if there's a lot of grease hardened inside the case, you might find the washer stuck to the back of the housing. In any case, make sure you keep track of it because it's an important small part. And we set those off to the side. Then we remove the spool shaft sleeve. This is a little brass sleeve that lives in this small box at the back of the housing. You can just push it out from the back with a small screwdriver. And again, it's a good idea to take a picture. The sleeve has a wide end that goes towards the front of the housing and a narrow end that goes towards the back of the housing. So that's the one that gets inserted when you put the reel back together. Finally, we're going to remove the dog and the dog spring. The dog and the dog spring are the main parts of the anti-reverse and the click. So this gear controls the anti-reverse when the reel's all put back together. And this is also a very good place to take a picture so that you can remember the orientation of the little gear, the eccentric gear, and the dog spring. This is probably the trickiest part of the whole reassembly when you get to it. So if you take the dog and the dog spring assembly out, you can take them apart. You will notice that it goes on that center nib. There's two nibs there. So when you put it back together, it goes on that center nib. When you take the spring out, you can see you have two small parts. So those need to go somewhere in the tray or a small container so you can keep track of them. And now we're pretty much done. We can clean and lubricate the parts.